Hey everyone, and welcome to today's live stream. Hope you're all having a good evening or a good day wherever you are. I hope you're having a great Saturday or Friday or whatever it is, wherever you are right now. Live stream. Oops, that's called echo when you forget to turn off the sound. So today I'm talking about objective typology, objective personality, the OP system, developed by DaveSuperPowers. Yes, the OP system developed by a man with superpowers. I'm not making this up. So last year, DaveSuperPowers, one of the best YouTubers when it comes to MBTI-related content from many years back, came back from long hiatus with a new system with 512 or more personality types. And he has been working on this for a really long time and put a lot of effort and work into developing these theories with a higher ambition, and the ambition to be scientific and objective in the study of personality. So when Dave came back, I was actually very, very happy because I felt, okay, finally there is somebody in this community that I can consider to be an equal in the sense that they are working towards a similar ambition, a similar aim, a similar cause as myself. Finally, there is a group that understands or seems to understand the things that I consider to be Neojungian typology, or the goal of Neojungian typology. Now, as you might know, I work with Neojungian typology, and this is a term I've used to describe as the study of personality based on flow and happiness. My theory is personality psychology cannot be purely a behavioralist system anymore. We cannot just be happy and content with trying to describe 16 static stereotypes or personality types. We cannot just be happy with just rendering everybody a simple box, a simple definition that will apply in 100% of all scenarios and that will accurately describe a person in every situation. The classic MBTI does not work, and it has not worked ever. The problem with the MBTI is its focus on trying to describe people from a very one-dimensional perspective. It's all basic personality descriptions that are consistent over time. There is no factor of time or development. There is no factor of happiness or mood. There is no attempt to describe the health or the level of development or health of a personality type. Every personality type is every personality type. No more, no less. So when I started making videos, I started out with, and perhaps one of the most important parts of my videos became that of subtypes. One of my most popular content became those that describe different personality subtypes and subvariations. This was very important because there are more than one way of being an INFJ, more than one way of being an ENTP, more than one way of being an ISFJ. Every personality type has multiple subtypes and subvariations within said personality type. So while they all share a similarity, a similar flow type, they are different in that they can develop differently. They can go into different work careers. They can come from different backgrounds. They can have had different experiences. They've developed different methods of using the cognitive functions in their stack. They've developed different stacks of their own. And so they are people who share similar flow functions and a similar personality in a good mood, but who, because they are not always in flow, will act and look differently to one another. So DaveSuperPowers and Shannon and their theories are, from my perspective, basically brilliant. I've been digging through this, simmering this for about a year, slowly processing, taking it my time to form an opinion about this system because, yeah, it's very important for me not to rush into anything. I like to let things work themselves out. I like to take my time to get to know the concepts. I like to study it. I like to see how it works. I want to process it and let it simmer and develop into something. So the more I've been doing this and the more I've been digging into the system, the more I realize there are so many overlaps and so many similarities that it's pure. It's like they are my long lost twins of personality psychology. First thing I did was I set out to type some of their celebrities and some of the people that have been typed by objective personality. I came to look at how the people that have typed themselves to objective personality would do on my personality test. I've tested out to see, okay, how do they test different celebrities? And I've come to find there's a big overlap. There's a huge overlap. I've compared myself to many systems up to this point. I've compared myself to Keirsey's theories. I've compared myself to celebrity types and a lot of the different practitioners out there. But very few have a similar way of typing, such as myself. So I was surprised then to realize that me and DaveSuperPowers, we share about a 50% overlap in how we type different personality types. About a 50% overlap. Yeah, that's huge. Okay, 50%, that might not sound much, but it's huge. If you throw out on 16 personality types, the chances that you and another person will type the same person the same way, the odds for that are about 1 to 16. So that's about, give or take, 8%. There's an 8%, if it was purely random, there would be an 8% overlap between you and the other person. So with a lot of other systems, I've come to hit about a 25 to 30% overlap, which is still good enough, still good, still fine, but not convincingly fine, not satisfyingly fine. There's so many contradictions, so many problems, so many issues. There are so many differences in definitions. There are so many differences in how they type, and there's a bigger inconsistency. So 50% I came to find is the highest I've ever hit with another group of personality practitioners or typologists. I had a talk with Dave earlier on Skype a few weeks back, and one of the things that came up was that he shared my similar ambition of typing people based on flow. When the MBTI is focused on asking you, what do you do in a normal day? How do you often do things? Do you work in a logical career, or do you work with people? Okay, you work with people, so you're a feeler. Okay, you work with programming, so you're a thinker. Okay, you work by yourself, so you're an introvert. While the MBTI is focused on just quickly diagnosing you, putting in a box, just making it so as simple and convenient as possible, Dave and Shannon make an active effort to try to pinpoint your motivation. So what they are doing is they're looking at not if you work in a career that requires you to use logic. They don't type you based on whether you say that you do a certain thing often on a daily basis, but they type you based on if you seem to like doing it, if you seem to enjoy doing it, if you seem to be motivated by it. And I think that's why their overlap with my system is so high, because my system is focused on flow types and pinpointing motivations and values. And when they type people, have to try to figure out people's motivations and values. We both seem to come from a similar angle. Now, before I started with this video, I read through some articles online and I heard what other people were thinking about objective personality. And I read through some articles that were criticizing the system. So I came upon a table that I thought was very interesting, and I'm going to pick it up on the screen right now so you can look at it. And this is apparently a definition used to define if you're part of subjective typology or objective typology. And I think this chart sums up pretty well the difference between a lot of the MBTI practitioners out there and the aim of Neojungian typology and of objective personality. First things first, often the baseline of the person who practices subjective typology is they tend to view personality psychology as a shortcut to quick typing. They're looking for speed typing. They're looking for quick and easy definitions. Okay, introverts start up conversations. Introverts, they're reserved and cautious and socially anxious. Extroverts start up conversations, keep conversations going, take initiative. Judgers, they like to have plans. They make a lot of plans. Perceivers, they tend to do things in a moment's notice. They tend to be late and show up just a minute before the deadline. They tend to improvise and do things just in the moment. In the heat of the moment, they do everything. In subjective typology, it's like a demand to figure out answers and make up your mind as quickly as possible. Core assets of subjective typology is just jumping to typing yourself and other people as soon as you get to know typology. As soon as you get to know a system, you try to put it to practice immediately. And you do it with confidence. I see people that have only used MBTI for a week that are commenting on my videos, telling me what type I am. They go on my videos and they go, I've been studying this MBTI thing just now, and I figured out the feeling and thinking, and now I come to think, Erik, you must be an ISFJ. Seriously, there are people like that come from out of nowhere with no background, no afterthought, no time processing, no time studying, no time introspecting, just jumping into trying to figure something out. And these kind of people that are looking for certainty, of course, they're confused and upset by contradictions. They get into this, they get very certain, very sure, very quickly about how everything works. ENTPs, they're sociopaths. INFJs, INFPs are crybabies. INFJs are Jesus. They come in very quickly with this, and then they start getting upset by all the contradictions over time. They start getting confused and they start struggling. Oh, but how come in some situations I act more like an ENTP then? And how come sometimes I can be a bit of a sociopath? And, how come I met an ENTP and he seems to be quite nice? How come these contradictions come up? How come I met an INFP and they're quite emotionally mature and they seem to have it all so together? How can this be? How can it be that people don't fall into these boxes that I've developed so quickly? And the problem, because they get upset and confused by this, the problem because they don't take the time to process this, is they immediately try to make up their mind again. So he's not an ENTP. He must be another type. Oh, so my type must be wrong, so there must be another criteria. And then they look for another quick and easy definition that will work just like as good as a McDonald's burger would, fast food typology, that's the thing. There's fast food typology and there's slow food typology, and I'm a part of slow food typology. A part of it is also objective typology. Is about knowing questions will be answered over time. It means patiently building knowledge and skills over time. It means taking the time to check your work, taking the time to double check your work, taking the time to process things, being able to discuss this with other people, being able to work through contradictions, being able to sit down when there's an issue and not just go, that cannot be, and I cannot accept this, and this cannot be true, but actually sitting down and trying to go, okay, but how can it be that you also have these personality traits? How can it go that you also relate to this if we're different types? And how can it be that I've thought I've been this type all along when I'm like this more than that? Ultimately, you have to submit to some kind of evidence and reasoning that goes beyond your own subjectivity. Your own feelings cannot make up your mind. You cannot just use your own feelings to make up a decision about how to type other people. Obviously, if you let your feelings get the better of you, you'll be quick to generalize, stereotype, and your anger or frustrations with other people will leak into your read of them. I see so many people who type others who do so out of negativity rather than positivity. You're that type because you're stupid. You're that type because you're shallow. You're that type because you're lazy. You're that type because you're often... As soon as I hear another person's reasoning about your personality becoming this biased, I ultimately decide to discard everything else that is said. If I notice that a person is getting biased, I ultimately decide to discard and disregard everything they are saying. because I recognize I have to maintain a degree of balance and calm. I have to resist the urge to hype or dramatize or create extremes and polar opposites. I have to recognize the similarities. I have to understand the patterns, and I have to be patient. And that's apparently objective typology. Jan, yeah, some type me as INFP because I talk about empathy related things, even though I'm an INTP. That's Jan Michael Lemage from the comments. Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing, your skills and abilities and your development says nothing about your personality type. You can act like any personality type. You can do anything. Anybody can be any type. Anybody can act in any certain way in any specific situation. You can briefly, if you wish, take on the qualities of other personality types. You can be inspired by other types, and you can borrow their tactics in your own life and use them to your advantage. You can, believe it or not, empathize with other people and see their perspective and take it on as your own for a short moment of time. The thing that differentiates personality psychology and flow psychology from regular typology is most people are just preoccupied with building up base definitions. INFJs only use NI. NI, they don't use NE, they don't use SI, they don't know, these things don't exist. INFJs, NI means this. And then everything the INFJ does is NI. Every single thing they do is NI. Every action they take in their life, every decision they make must be traced to NI. Somehow and somehow. This creates all kinds of circular reasoning where you build up examples where everything ultimately becomes introverted intuition. It's easy to borrow explanations and small generalizations and rationalizations that will verify whatever it is you believe. It's easy in typology to just cook up some explanation that will magically make it possible for you to act in any way without ultimately challenging the subjectivity or the stereotypes of the general MBTI. Flow psychology is to ask, how is a person when they are motivated, energized, stable, and confident in themselves? What is a person the most steady in? What do they go to for evidence? What do they go to for certainty? What do they do to gain and to maintain control and confidence in their life? What do they do to maintain a sense of ease and effortlessness in their actions and their personality and in their behavior? What does a person do when they need energy and recharge? What does a person do when they need to reconnect with themselves? What does a person do in flow? Ultimately, what a person does in flow is the opposite of what they do in stress. So with typology, you can either look at a person in flow or you can look at them in stress. You can see them at their worst, you can see them at their best. You can see what their big key stressors in life are, and you can see what their biggest parts of flow psychology are. You can see what they are at their best and at their worst. You can see them when they are inspired or in a moment when they are unusually inspired or unusually caught on by other people to act a certain way. You can see when they are in a state of control and when they are in a state of pushing and putting something on and stressing and forcing something through, even if it's not their normal personality. You can see what personality traits are put on. You can see which are an integral part of them when they are in a positive state of balance. When you're trying to type somebody based on flow types, what you're looking at is ultimately their motivations. I disregard any evidence a person will put forward that is just situational. As soon as it's situational, I don't care. When a person says, sometimes I can be bossy. Sometimes I can be nice when I need to be. Sometimes I can be a bit unloyal. That's situational for me. That's circumstantial. I cannot know what situation brought this on. I can have no idea what made them act this way. I have no idea what put them in this or what they even mean with the terms. A problem with typology is we don't even know what the terms mean. So what we need is people actively trying to define their terms in a way that is valuable. There's lots of definitions on typology and the cognitive functions. If you go to a basic website about the cognitive functions, something very striking occurs. I'm going to show you the base definitions used to define the cognitive functions for Myers-Briggs. And this is very sad, actually. This is really sad. This website is really sad. I'm sorry, but it's really sad. What am I doing? Okay, here we go. This is from cognitiveprocesses.com/cognitive functions. Here's your basic extroverted intuition definition. Notice hidden meanings and interpret them. Entertain a wealth of possible interpretations from just one idea, or interpreting what somebody's behavior really means. Seeing things as if, with various possible representations of reality. Juggle many different ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and meanings in your mind at once, with the possibility that they are all true. Weaving themes and threads together. Let's look at another one. Extroverted feeling. Being polite, being nice, being friendly, being considerate, being appropriate, often resolve around the process of extroverted feeling. Extroverted feeling involves a desire to connect with or disconnect from others and is often evidenced by expressions of warmth or displeasure, and self-disclosure. We respond according to expressed or even unexpressed wants and needs of others. Keeping in touch, laughing at jokes when others laugh, and trying to get people to act kindly to each others involves extroverted feeling. I don't know if you have to say anymore. I will show you one more just to get my point across. Introverted thinking. Finding just the right word to clearly express an idea concisely, crisply, and to the point. Having an internal sense of the essential qualities of something, noticing the fine distinctions that make it what it is, and then naming it. Involving internal reasoning processes of deriving subcategories of classes and sub-principles of general principles. Oh my God, that's a hard sentence to swallow. Used in problem-solving, analysis, and refining of a product or an idea. So first issue, some definitions of cognitive functions are so abstract they're impossible to comprehend. They're made into something so abstract it could be basically anything. It's given a poetic language and put in a nice terminology, but it's not placed in a context. It's never placed in a context. The main issue with every cognitive function definition is it's never placed in a context. It's given some loose set of activities you can think of as this cognitive function. When I'm problem solving, I'm using introverted thinking. When I'm being nice to others, I'm using extroverted feeling. When I'm out sporting, I'm using extroverted sensing. It's given some very loose activities it's connected to, but it's not really put in a context where we can understand what makes that introverted thinking then, what makes reasoning introverted thinking, what makes being nice extroverted feeling, what makes extroverted sensing being sporty. It's simply just connected to some things without any kind of explanation. And what is context? Why is context so important? Why do we need it? Okay, first problem with the cognitive functions. Okay, the second problem with the cognitive functions is it's Sorry, I lost my thought process there for a second. I lost my TI there for a second. Okay. Second problem of the cognitive functions. It's not put in a context of why do you do it? What makes you do it? Okay, I'm gonna go over to some of the things that objective personality is doing. Okay, what is FI according to objective personality? First, it can be, let me get it up here, prioritizing your personal values before you consider the tribe's reasons for something. What is FE? Prioritizing the spectrum of the tribe's values, then seeks their personal reasons. Okay, what's SE? Answers are found by gathering new facts, then organizing known concepts later. Okay, why is this better? It's better because it puts it in a personal context. It makes an attempt to understand what's going on inside the mind of another person. It looks at, okay, what do I like, or what are my reasons, what are my thought processes, what are my feelings, what are my motivations, and then it connects it to some general activity like the tribe or the world or other people. It looks at facts, or it looks at the imagination, it looks at ideas, and it connects it to your personal motivations. It looks at and tries to actually make an attempt to describe your thought process. Where the base cognitive function definitions you encounter online are simply describing cognitive function processes, objective personality is explaining the thought process behind the cognitive functions, hence making them actual cognitive functions, actual thought processes, actual motivations or processes of reasoning or valuing or gathering or organizing information. A cognitive function definition must have a context of what are you doing? What are you thinking? What are you feeling while you are doing an activity? That's the context that's been missing. That's why I've come to really appreciate objective personality's works. Japanese letter commenter says, when I'm excited, I tend to plan out everything, almost like I started planning out what I will do in 10 years, all because I'm excited. I also see many definitions of TI that I can't tell the difference between FI and TI and TE and TI. I agree, and yet when you see TE in human form, it's usually pretty obvious, says Sinister Kitty. Exactly, if I did have TE, I wouldn't see it in myself, but I see it in so many others. So you can see a cognitive function in so many situations. You can see it used in so many different contexts. You can see any personality type engaging in TE. But what you always want to look for is the motivation there. Do they perceive TE as an effortless, voluntary, and intrinsically motivating activity? Do they consider TE to be stabilizing, calming, and steadying on their personality? Do they consider TE to be a resting point of evidence and calm and proof and data and solid thought out reasoning about the world and about the group and about the tribe? Yeah, then it's flow TE. Is it instead considered to be unsettling and personally criticizing and personally condemning? Is it more considered to be unsettling, scary, or turbulent and unstable? Is it considered to be a challenge on your personality and in your identity and on your values? That suggests it's stress TE. So ultimately with FI, you're looking at your personal reasoning behind an activity. What do I like? Who am I? What is my identity? First of all, there's an I there. There's an I there, a very important I. That indicates the focus is on self. The starting point is self, then others. First self, then others. Who am I? What do I value? How can I share this with other people? How can I make other people happy using my personality? How can I make the world a better place by sharing of myself and my purpose? How can I and my values help make and bring harmony to the world? That's classic FI flow. That's how you distinguish between FI and TE. When you look at TE, you look at, okay, external reasoning processes. You look at yourself. You look at rather first your tribe and their reasoning process. What do people think? What is the evidence? What are people reasoning about this? What are people's facts and arguments about this? What different arguments exist in the tribe and in the group? What are people doing? What are the systems saying? What are the statistics saying? What are the numbers saying? What are the patterns and trends saying? Okay, it's connecting into many different extroverted processes here: extroverted intuition, extroverted sensing. And I'm sorry for this, but that's another problem with the cognitive functions. No cognitive function exists in a vacuum. You cannot purely define one single cognitive function on its own. Every cognitive function is ultimately connected to others. You cannot only observe, you must also make a decision. You cannot only observe, you must also process and sleep on it. You cannot just observe, you must also play with it and test and experiment with it. And that brings us to another important part of objective personality, and that's subtypes. So objective personality is also making an effort to describe subtypes. They're talking about observers, deciders. They're talking about consume, blast, play, and sleep. 4 different terms that show pretty different styles of activity and behavior and prioritization. And prioritization is a key word here. While everyone has a distinct flow type, okay, everyone has an ENTP flow type or an ENFP flow type or so on and so forth. People can be divided into subtypes. There's blast versions, there's sleep versions, there's consume versions, and all of them indicate different styles and prioritizations of cognitive functions within flow. So some are going to look at extroverted intuition, and that's probably going to be consume heavy ones. Some are going to be looking at the blast, and they're going to be decision-making heavy ones. And that's all indicating which cognitive functions you prioritize over others. While both are nice and while you enjoy both of them, you tend to prioritize one over the other simply because you thought yourself it's more important than the other. Yes, I can do this and I like both, but I prefer to do this. Usually in most situations, I would rather pick this because it's more important to my career, or it's become more important to me because of my experiences, my history, and my development, and who I am at this moment. It's just more important right now. An important difference between objective personality and Neojungian typology in my model is I use 16 cognitive functions, and DaveSuperPowers and Shannon, they use 8. They still use the standard base 8. So I came to develop 8 new cognitive functions. While we have the classic Jungian definitions, introverted thinking and introverted intuition and introverted feeling and extroverted sensing and so on and so forth, I also have designed 8 cognitive functions based on whether you are judging or perceiving. So basically you have proactive intuition, you have reactive or adaptable intuition, you have proactive feeling, and you have adaptable feeling. So here you're looking at 2 different definitions and concepts that ultimately describe differences in how we assert confidence and power over the world, how we express ourselves, and how we try to push on the world. I use these 8 cognitive functions to describe personality type with greater nuance. So that's a difference, and that's why it's not so easy to necessarily cross-connect these types and the systems. Sometimes you can, with the base 8 functions, say a lot about a person. And often when you look at DaveSuperPowers NI, you realize this is NI with a J swing. And when you look at DaveSuperPowers NE, it's definitely NE, but with a perceiving swing. DaveSuperPowers and most people who work with typology build in judging and perceiving into each cognitive function without explaining it. It's there. It's always been there. So INTJs are NI. INTPs are not. INTPs are not NI. But in my system, they are. And that's the difference. That's a big difference between Neojungian typology and objective personality. In my system, an ENFP has NE and FE as their flow types or flow functions. And INFP has NI and FI as their flow functions, making them completely different in that the INFP perceives their intuition as something that is purely internal, their motives and values as something that are purely internal and personal. And ENFP perceives their feelings, their values, and their imagination as something that is shared with the group and the tribe, and something that starts out and is gathered and understood through talking with and communicating with and building relations with the tribe. The distinction that I'm making is there's also feeling perceiving types and feeling perceiving functions and intuitive perceiving functions. And that's a connection that I've been building where, yeah, ENFPs and INFPs, they're very, very similar because their thought processes are open-ended, like you would expect an intuitive perceiving types to be, and their motivations are built adaptably through perceiving rather than judging. So they're not going to be likely to shepherd or guide or manage other people, and they're not going to necessarily enjoy those activities. Now, my mind is constantly working to process and contextualize and understand how we are defining things and how we are using our definitions and which ones work and which ones stick. And I'm slowly trying to build it all together and connect all the dots and process it all. So ultimately, eventually, maybe I will discover that Dave's theories are in some ways better than mine. Some of his decisions, some of his reasoning, some of his values and his definitions are more useful than mine. And then we'll perhaps move towards a greater overlap. And perhaps I hope he will also find some value in my work and my theories, and we'll be able to move from the beta stage to the alpha stage, to put it in those terms. Essentially, we're both just starting out with mapping something that is fundamentally very complex. There's a problem and there's a criticism when it comes to the terms of objective psychology or objective personality. And the base problem with that is you can never objectively define all of human personality. Some things are rooted in the subjective and in our experiences. Ultimately, we all have to admit that the subjectivity, the motivations, the interests, the values of the person who is acting say more about their personality than their decisions and their actions. While a person's actions in any situation can be complicated and can be contradictory, the person's motivations and interests tend to be relatively consistent. A person's values and feelings about a certain thing are going to be relatively stable, while their actions and how they pursue these values and motivations can be relatively flexible. And that's the base problem of personality psychology. Ultimately, you're going to have to accept that you have to study people's motivations and ask them questions about how they're feeling if you're going to develop meaningful psychology. If you're only doing what the big five is doing, and that's just tracking behavior and tracking variations in behavior, you're ultimately skilled at reading the surface, but you're not good at reading personality. You know a person's behavior, but you don't know their personality. You don't know their values and their intentions behind this behavior. So you have no idea ultimately if they're coming from a position of stress or flow or control or chaos. You have no idea where anything of this is coming from. That's the base problem with the MTI. There's lots of people who claim to know what a personality type is. There's lots of people that have definitions for the cognitive functions, but there's very few that seem to know what's going on inside the head of the people they are typing and describing. And that's the greatest failure of personality typology. So yeah, those are my ending words on objective personality and DaveSuperPowers system. If you haven't already, do check it out and do get to know it. And yeah, if you have any thoughts about this or any opinions and impressions about objective personality already, feel free to comment down below, and feel free to ask your questions and share your thoughts. Also, join up on the Discord, the community that I have set up, the chat where you can discuss all of this. I'm sharing the link right now, and I'll put it down in the comments as well. Let's create a discussion that will ultimately turn the MBTI upside down and will make it impossible to continue with all the stereotypes. Thanks everyone for watching, and hope to see you all in my next video.